Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. For today's cards, I am revisiting a technique I haven't done in a while, involving alcohol inks and alcohol lift ink. It's been a while since I've used my alcohol inks. I had bought all the new colors that were released and the new tools last year, a year ago, whenever it was a long time ago. Yeah, it was, I think, Creativation last year. So yeah, it's been about a year. So I'm starting with YUPO paper, and I am working on my glass media mat. This is actually the travel size one. I got the smaller one because it actually kind of fits on my workspace. I highly recommend, if you're working with alcohol inks, like a glass cutting board, this Tim Holtz glass media mat, something non-porous works best because it's just the easiest to clean up too. And then, of course, YUPO paper. YUPO paper is formulated for things like this. It is not actually paper, like the wording that I had added said. It really allows like alcohol inks to like glide, like you can see here. So I'm just playing. Literally just pulled out YUPO paper, grabbed a bunch of different, like several different shades of pink alcohol inks and my blending solution. And I will link to the specific colors I used. And also one color of, I'm using Alcohol Pearl, the Enchanted one. And it's just an alcohol ink with some like shimmer pigment added to it. And then I'm using this Tim Holtz air blower. I had a smaller one in my stash meant for my camera. You know, those little air blowers to blow dust and things out of the inner workings of your camera. And I used to use that before. And then when this was released, I was like, I wonder. I'm just curious. Is it better? It is. I'm quite happy with it because it's larger. It's easier to use. I don't have to like reef on it so much, so it doesn't hurt my hands. So quite happy with all of that. So anywho, like I said, I was just playing. The first one I put down, you know, some inks and then some alcohol pearl and then a little bit of blending solution, and then I move it around with the ink blower. With this second one, I put the blending solution down first, then added the inks and fiddled around, and then I moved around with the blower. And no matter what you do, it's always going to be different. It's always fun to see where things go. Another thing with alcohol inks, always make sure you're working in a well-ventilated area. Very important, because again, you're working with alcohol inks, that sort of stuff. And you always just common sense and, you know, common sense, reasonable caution, because these are alcohol inks, they're also very flammable. So yeah, you want to be in a well-ventilated area and just clean up well afterwards. So with both of these backgrounds, I just kind of kept fiddling with them until I was happy with it. I wanted fairly solid in the sense of a lot of ink added to the YUPO paper because I want to do the alcohol lift ink stamping on top of it. So I didn't want really light, you know, wispy backgrounds. Those are gorgeous. I have yet to perfect that. In fact, I can't even do it yet. But for something like this with the lift ink, I wanted a lot of color down, a lot of alcohol ink down, like pretty much solid backgrounds. So once I was happy with them, I also used the little blower. I was using it to also help kind of dry some of this, let them dry a bit. And then to clean up, so you can see the two different backgrounds there, and then to clean up my hands and my media mat, I just use hand sanitizer. You can also use rubbing alcohol, that works great. Hand sanitizer is a little bit easier because, one, I think everyone has hand sanitizer in hand. That was also another reason why I wasn't doing videos like with alcohol inks for a long time, because it was nearly impossible there for how many weeks and months to even get hand sanitizer. So I just have like large jugs of it and use it for sanitizing, but also use it to clean up things like this because it cleans up alcohol inks off the glass mat, off my hands perfectly. So everything's been cleaned up, set aside. Now I'm going to do the alcohol lift ink technique. So I have an alcohol lift ink pad. This is made by Ranger to go with all their things. And then I have a background stamp. This first one is the Radiating Hearts background. This is from Simon's Love You 2 release. And then I have one of my backgrounds. And I'm just working with my MISTI here because I wasn't sure if I would need to stamp anything twice. And in the end, I didn't need to. But I've got my background, I have my stamp. I'm inking up the stamp with this alcohol lift ink. And there is something in this ink that it just kind of like reactivates the ink. So I inked up the stamp, you stamp it onto these backgrounds, and it lifts the ink from the background. And at first it doesn't look like much is going on, but the magic is you blot it. You can just use a soft cloth. I just grabbed a piece of paper towel because the cloth I normally would use, like my microfiber one, was full of ink from my recent projects. So I blotted it first with a paper towel, and then I gently rub it. And that's where you start seeing the design. And then the next thing you need to do is have regular cardstock on hand and stamp whatever stamp you use, whether it's a background stamp, an image, whatever. Stamp it onto the cardstock, because it will, you know, all that ink that you've lifted from the background is sitting on your stamp. Now, I'm using red rubber background stamps here. You can use clear stamps to do this technique. It's fine. It will stain your clear stamps. It doesn't matter how quickly you clean them. The alcohol inks will just stain your stamps. I'm just saying, it doesn't bother me at all. My stamps are all stained regardless, but it will stain them. But regardless of what type of stamp you use, make sure you clean it off once you're done. Like I use Simon's Ultra Clean, and I'll link to it. That's my favorite stamp cleaner. But I immediately clean my stamp off. I don't want these inks and the lift ink and all that stuff to be sitting on my stamps, because, yeah, rather be safe than sorry. So I cleaned off my stamp, and then I'm going to repeat the process, but this time I'm using the XOXO background. I was very curious to see how this would work. The first background had, very fine, thin line detail, and then this one's a little more chunky. So I was like, not sure. I had no idea what was going to happen. I really like how both turned out. It was really fun. So same thing. I have my alcohol ink on YUPO paper background in there. I inked up the stamp with the alcohol lift ink. I'm stamping it onto that background, and then making sure to just press it down really, really evenly, press it down really well, peel that off the stamp. I immediately put the cardstock in this time. I was just curious if it would make a difference. It doesn't really. But regular cardstock, just to transfer all that ink that was sitting on the stamp from lifting it onto the cardstock. So basically you're getting 2-for-1 backgrounds when you do this technique, which is really fun. And then same thing. I'm blotting this background and then gently rubbing, like I'm not putting a ton of pressure. I'm just gently rubbing with a paper towel, and it just lifts off more of that ink, and you get that cool kind of ghost impression in a sense. I'm doing this after so long. I'm all excited. I'm like, ooh, what other stamps can I do? How many backgrounds, different colors? Sky's the limit. I went with pinks this time just cause I thought it'd be fun, like very, very Valentine-y colors, but you can do whatever you want. So now I have 4 backgrounds, 2 of them with the solid, alcohol ink backgrounds, and then these 2 that are just imprinted onto regular white cardstock. I'm going to trim all of these down with my paper trimmer. I wanted them all to be smaller than an A2 card front. So I just did some fiddling till I was happy with it. With the larger alcohol ink pieces, I'm just going to save those larger pieces to use like on a future project. There was one strip with the XOXO background that was quite large, and I was like, ooh, that would actually work really nicely like for a bookmark or something, So, ideas, as always. But yeah, I just kind of trimmed off, and chose my favorite parts left over for my backgrounds. And then for my sentiments, I used the "You Are Simply the Best" wafer die, as well as the "Thank You for Being a Friend" wafer die. And as is tradition with me, I die cut the sentiments multiple times from white cardstock. And then the topper is some pink glitter cardstock from my stash. And I'm going to stack all these together just to give it that dimension that I just love so much. So I've got the 2 layers of white cardstock, and then the top will be the pink glittery die cut. And I just stacked those together with my craft tacky glue. And I did this twice for each sentiment, since I'm doing 4 cards, because why not do them all at once? So I just kept going along and adding just little dabs of my craft tacky glue and then adhering them together. And with the "Thank You for Being a Friend" wafer die, that's just that wafer die. There's no outline. for that one. The You Are Simply the Best does come with an outline. I originally wasn't going to use it at all. It just depends on my mood. Sometimes I use the outlines, sometimes I use just the words, sometimes I use, you know, just whatever's going on. But I was originally just going to have just the words because I didn't want to cover up any of these backgrounds because, you know, I was quite happy with how they turned out and didn't want to cover any of it. However, you'll see here in a second that XOXO background on the white, the sentiment just blended into, like, you can't see it at all. So what I ended up doing is normally I'll just, you know, I'll die cut some vellum if I don't want to cover up too much of the background. But even the vellum wouldn't let it stand out enough. So then I started thinking, I was like, what can I do? You know, I could just do some cardstock, etc. I thought pink cardstock, but I'm like, I really didn't want to cover up the background. And I'm like, what about pink vellum? I don't have pink vellum, but I can make pink vellum. So that's what I did. I have a piece of vellum here, and I just quickly scribbled a Copic marker over it. So I've got my RV09 Copic marker. Quickly covered the back with that. And then it just takes a little bit longer than usual to dry because it's vellum. But let that dry. So much happier with that. So then I'm going to die cut the outline from that piece of vellum. And then I'm going to adhere that "You Are Simply the Best" phrase to the vellum. So I die cut it from the other side. So the actual like part that has the Copic on it is at the back. That's what's going to adhere directly to the card front. It doesn't necessarily matter which one you do, but with vellum, when you color any of it with Copic markers, if you flip it over, the side that doesn't have the Copics on it, it just kind of mutes it just a little bit. So I was quite pleased with how this turned out. And the color was just perfect. I literally grabbed the RV09 on a whim. I was like, let's just see what happens. And then the colors just went so perfectly together. So once I've got those adhered together, I'm adding little dabs of the glue directly behind the words because you don't want the glue showing through the vellum. And then I adhered that to my background. And then I adhered all of the sentiments, the die cut sentiments, to those backgrounds. And then I wanted to just finish it off a little bit more. So I cut down some of the sentiments from this Reverse Lucky sentiment strip pack. I've shown these in tons of videos. There's so many available now. So yeah, there's just tons and I love them. They make life so much more convenient when I can quickly just trim them down and stick them on a card. So I trimmed down some sentiments from there. And then to adhere these to my card fronts, I'm just using my little Derice foam strips. So peel off the backing, stick those on, and then I can pop these onto each of my card fronts. So then the ones that say, "Thank you for being a friend," it says, "I feel lucky to know you." And then the ones that say, "You are simply the best, wishing you love and luck." So love how that just kind of completes everything. So after I've got all my little sentiment strips adhered to all of my card fronts, I am going to, of course, do my insides of my cards, which I'm going to keep pretty simple. All I'm going to do is just line up these background stamps again. And my card bases are Simon's Heavyweight White Cardstock. They'll be top folding A2 cards. I took some Post-it tape and masked off right at the fold so I don't get any ink past the fold of the card. And then I'm just inking up the background stamps with Spun Sugar Distress Oxide ink. And then just stamping that really well onto the inside of the card. Taking out the card base. Repeating that for the second card. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the other background stamp, so that all of the insides of the cards have the backgrounds, the same background stamped with that Spun Sugar ink. And that's it. I decided not to add any other sentiments because, like I always like to do, even though this is included in my Valentine series, you know, there's hearts and there's pinks, but it doesn't say Happy Valentine's. You know, I can use these any time of the year, and that's what I like. I'll get more use out of them. So I did that. All my card bases are done. To adhere my card fronts, I'm going to use Simon's Big Mama foam tape. And I showed there, I just cracked open a new roll of this. I think this is like my third or fourth roll. I'm not even sure. My absolute favorite foam tape, because that roll is huge. And even for the amount of cards I use and the amount of foam tape I use, the roll lasts forever. And, but it's thin. It's not super bulky. So I adhered all the card fronts with that foam tape. And then as my final bit of embellishment, I'm using the new, I think they're called Cotton Candy. I can't remember. I'll have a link. It's the new little sequin mix from the Love You To collection as well. And I added those rather liberally to all the cards, as well as some heart crystals from Studio Claudia that I had in my stash. Just, again, some pink, some hearts, but it doesn't specifically say Happy Valentine's Day. Because I like cards that I can just send to people to say, you know, thank you, thinking of you, etc. So sometimes they'll have the colors and the hearts and other times they won't. It just depends on my mood and, you know, making more use out of my products rather than like sticking to a very specific theme, you know? So once I had my bling in place, I matched these all up with some cotton candy envelopes. I have some metallic ones. I didn't have enough left. I need to get more of these. But yeah, cotton candy regular envelopes and cotton candy metallic envelopes. And then these cards are complete. Like I said, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I will link to all the supplies used. I will also have links to other designers because this is part of a blog hub. I will have all that info in my blog post, so just check that out in the description box below the video if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching and for subscribing and for thumbs upping and commenting. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.